People walking down Hawthorne Street that chilly October morning had no idea they were seconds away from witnessing something that would stop them in their tracks. They didn't know that in the middle of that noisy sidewalk, between the honking cars and rushing commuters, a single voice was about to break open every heart within earshot. But before any of that happened, a young man named Carter Hayes noticed a woman he normally would have walked past, until she looked up at him and said words he never imagined hearing from a stranger, "Hold my baby, I'll sing." Carter froze with his coffee halfway to his lips. The woman standing before him was small in frame but carried a quiet energy that made him stand straighter. Her clothes were worn, her jacket far too thin for the cold. She held a little girl wrapped in a faded pink blanket, her tiny face pressed against her mother's shoulder. The woman's eyes were dark, tired, but oddly steady. There was a kind of courage in them, a kind that made Carter blink. "I'm sorry," he said, wondering if he misheard her. She smiled gently, an exhausted, fragile smile, the kind someone gives after life has pushed them one time too many. "Just for a minute," she said. "I promise she won't cry. She likes people." People were moving around them, annoyed, indifferent, busy. But Carter felt rooted to the spot, drawn by something he couldn't explain. He wasn't the type to hold strangers' babies. He wasn't even the type to stop for anything that slowed down his schedule. As a 30-year-old marketing director, he lived by the clock. But something about this woman, this moment, felt different, like he was being asked to participate in something meaningful, something bigger than his usual routine. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. She nodded and placed the baby in his arms. The little girl opened her eyes, blinking up at him with quiet curiosity. Carter shifted, awkward at first, then surprised by how naturally she settled against him. The woman stepped back, pulled her jacket closer around herself, and walked toward the open space near the bus stop where street performers usually stood. But no one was performing that morning. No one was waiting for magic or music. Most people just wanted to get to work. Then she lifted her chin and took a slow breath, as though gathering every piece of strength left inside her. Carter watched, holding the baby, unsure what she planned to do. But the tension in his chest told him something important was coming. Maybe it was the way she stood, like someone who had carried pain far too long and finally decided to share it with the world. Her voice rose. It was soft at first. A trembling note that floated across the sidewalk. A few people glanced her way, annoyed, then intrigued. Because even though the first note wavered, the second did not. And by the third, her voice had grown into something rich, warm, and heartbreakingly beautiful. It wasn't the voice of a trained professional. It was the voice of a woman who had lived through storms and somehow kept a piece of sunlight inside her soul. She sang an old hymn, one Carter faintly recognized from childhood Sunday mornings, but there was something different in the way she carried each word. It wasn't just a song. It was a story, a confession, a prayer all wrapped into sound. Conversation stopped. Footsteps slowed. A woman holding a grocery bag paused mid-stride. A teenage boy pulled out his earbuds. Even the bus driver, leaning against the open door of his bus, looked up, stunned. The woman sang like she was remembering someone she lost. Someone she loved. Someone she hoped to find again. Every word held weight, trembling but unbroken. Her eyes glistened, not with shame, but with a fierce determination that made Carter swallow hard. The baby in his arms didn't make a sound. She listened too, as though this moment was familiar to her, like she'd heard her mother pour her soul into the world many times before. By the time the woman reached the chorus, people had formed a circle around her. No one told them to. No one asked them to. They just couldn't walk away. Something in her voice tugged at the things everyone hides: regret, longing, grief, hope. Carter felt his eyes sting. She wasn't singing for money. She wasn't singing for pity. She was singing because she needed the world to hear her, to remember her, to see that she was more than the worn coat and tired eyes. When her voice rose into the final note, long and trembling but powerful enough to silence even the city noise, the crowd stood frozen. Not a single breath dared to interrupt the moment. And just as the last note faded into the crisp morning air, the woman lowered her head and whispered, almost too softly to hear. "Thank you for listening." Then she glanced at Carter, her expression a mixture of hope and apology. She didn't know that in less than a minute, her life, and his, was going to change forever. For a long moment, no one moved. The city felt suspended, like the world had paused to let the sound linger a little longer in the air. And then, slowly, someone began to clap. Another joined. Then another. Within seconds, applause echoed through the entire street, loud, raw, and overflowing with emotion. The woman looked startled. She stepped back as if the praise frightened her more than the performance itself. Carter, still holding the baby, watched the crowd press closer, not to overwhelm her, but to thank her. A woman placed a hand on her shoulder. A man wiped his eyes discreetly. A group of students whispered to each other, stunned. But the mother didn't smile. She looked at the ground, overwhelmed, gripping the sleeves of her thin jacket as though trying to keep herself from falling apart. Carter moved toward her, gently bouncing the baby. "She did great," he said softly. She nodded and reached for her daughter. Carter handed the little girl back, feeling oddly empty the moment her warmth left his arms. The child cuddled into her mother's chest, tiny fingers gripping her collar. "I didn't mean to cause a scene," the woman whispered. I just needed someone to hear me. I needed someone to see us." Carter hesitated. "I did see you. And everyone else did too." She brushed a curl behind her ear, cheeks flushed. "I used to sing in small places. Choirs, mostly. Then, life changed fast. Too fast." He didn't push. Something about her voice told him she wasn't ready to share the whole story yet. Around them, several people dropped money near her feet. She tried to return it, but her hands trembled too much to gather it all. Carter knelt and helped her pick up the bills. As he handed them to her, he noticed things he hadn't before, how her nails were chipped, how the knuckles on her fingers were red from cold, how she kept glancing around nervously as though expecting someone to shoo her away. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Ayana," she whispered. "My daughter's name is Arya." Beautiful names, he thought. Names that deserved something better than cold streets and uncertain tomorrows. He nodded toward a nearby bench. "Can you sit for a second?" She hesitated, then lowered herself onto the bench, clutching Arya tightly against her chest. Carter sat beside her, leaving space so she wouldn't feel cornered. "You have an incredible gift," he said. "Your voice. I've never heard anything like that." Ayana let out a shaky breath. "It's all I have left. Music. Everything else is gone. Where are you staying?" Her silence was enough of an answer. He softened his tone. "Is there anyone helping you? Family? Shelter workers?" Her eyes darted away. "No family. The shelters fill up too fast. If you don't get in line by 6, it's too late. I'm trying to keep Arya warm. And safe. That's all I'm trying to do." Carter felt something pull inside him, something unfamiliar. Empathy, maybe. Or responsibility. Or simply the raw truth that he couldn't walk away from her story now that he'd stepped into it. "Let me help," he said. Ayana shook her head quickly. "No. You've done enough. You held my baby. You listened. That's more kindness than most people offer." "But it's not enough," he said. "Not for you. Not for her." She stared ahead, blinking hard. "People don't help without wanting something back." "I don't want anything," he said softly. "Just, let me do one good thing today." Ayana studied him for a long moment, as though measuring the sincerity in his face. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away with her sleeve before it could drop onto the baby's blanket. "There's a diner 2 blocks away," he said. "Let me buy you food. Warm up. You and Arya." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. "Please," he added. "Just a meal." After a moment, she gave a single nod, small, fragile, but hopeful. Carter stood and waited for her to rise. The crowd had dispersed, but a few people lingered, watching her with softer eyes now. Not with pity, but with respect. They had heard her soul. The walk to the diner was slow. Ayanna kept glancing at Arya, adjusting her blanket, checking her breathing. Carter walked beside them, occasionally opening the door for her or slowing his pace so she wouldn't feel rushed. He noticed the way she relaxed just a little when the warm air of the diner brushed against her face. She sat in a booth near the window, holding Arya under her chin. Carter ordered pancakes, eggs, and hot chocolate for both of them. When the food arrived, Ayanna stared at it as if she hadn't seen a full plate in days. Maybe she hadn't. She fed Arya first, tiny spoonfuls of mashed banana, before taking a bite herself. The relief on her face was almost painful to watch. Halfway through the meal, her composure cracked. A tear slipped down her cheek, then another. She tried to hide them, but they kept falling, dripping onto her plate. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't cry in front of people." "You're safe here," Carter said. "You can cry." She exhaled shakily. "I wasn't always like this. I had a job. An apartment. A life. But when Arya's father left, I couldn't keep up. Rent went up. Hours at work went down. And then, everything fell apart. I tried to stay with friends, but no one wants a baby around long term. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but every door closes before I can step inside." Carter listened, heart heavy. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "But I can't let myself fall apart. Not while she needs me." He looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. "And that's why you sang today?" he asked. Ayanna nodded. "I needed people to see me. To see her. Just for one moment." Carter leaned forward, voice steady. "I saw you. And I'm not walking away." Ayanna held her daughter a little tighter, as though absorbing his words cautiously, like she wanted to believe him but didn't know if she could trust hope anymore. But Carter meant it. And in the hours that followed, his decision would change both their lives in ways none of them saw coming.